Good morning, everyone. So in class today, I got somebody with kind of a cranked up neck, difficulty turning the head, I believe it was to the right, not even as much range of motion as I'm showing now, like significant neck strain, neck pain, difficulty with rotation. So we're going to spend today's class looking at unwinding the spine, not just focusing on the neck specifically, but the entire spine, shoulders, and hips. I want to think in terms of spirals and how spirals create compression, specifically joint compression. Real good areas to think about joint compression are the humerus, how it attaches into the glenoid fossa of the scapula, and the femur and how it feeds into the hip socket, the acetabulum of the hip, and the small rotator muscles on both the humerus and the femur. And the way that those rotator muscles are directed, they're kind of like the coils of a loaded spring. So if you think of a big spring, this is not a loaded spring, but that's a spring. You can think of this as a big coiled loaded spring. If those muscles get tight, they're going to get tight in torque into rotation. And when a coiled spring rotates, it shrinks and gets tighter and smaller, so it can suck the head of the humerus and femur tighter into that socket, creating compression, joint compression. Those are the easy joints. These kind of compression states can happen through the spine, vertebrae of the neck. So I want to look at unwinding that coil, that spring mechanism, in order to get length, to get back to a decompressive state where we have more mobility. If you think about a joint getting compressed, it's getting tightly packed. It's not going to move as well with each other. If it's got a little bit more space, then you got better movement. You're going to get less degeneration within that joint. So it's a little bit just conceptually what we'll work on today. Let's get started. So we're going to start doing kind of our spread hands work, working from fingers through the elbow up to the shoulder. So I want to spread the hands as wide as possible. I want to be really active, trying to get as much space. How far away can you get your pinky from your thumb? And can you feel that stretch within the hand, like palm, backside of the hand? Can you feel those small muscles within the hand getting lengthened and straightened? And then at the same time, as you're spreading the hands wide, we're extending the elbows actively and fully. So you should start to feel a little bit of that stretch and strain up through into the elbow. And stretch is a mild term, mild word. It may be all you feel is a little bit of length, or it may be significant, like, oh, I really struggle with extending my elbow fully. Depending on patterns that you got going on in the body, it may be a major stretch, or it may just be a minor sensation of stretch. So elbows are extended, fingers are wide, and we're going to start with just spiraling palms up and spiraling palms down. And as I'm spiraling, I'm seeing how much can I spiral just up to the elbow without moving all the way up the arm. Can you start to feel some of that length tug on either side of the elbow as we spiral all the way open and all the way closed? And as we're doing this, we can start to continue to spiral, so we allow that movement to come higher up to where the humerus meets into the shoulder socket. Can you start to feel some of that stretch and rotation up into the rotator cuff muscle area? And with each one, I'm trying to move and rotate a little further. I'm trying to get as much spiral through elbows all the way up, hand, everything. And then we're going to slowly move this out to the side, and we're going to turn this into our bowls of soup. So I'm still getting my spiral, letting that movement come all the way up to the humeral head, seeing how much I can, and now I'm also alternating. I'm moving one arm at a time so I can really focus on each side. Keeping the hands spread as wide as possible. I want to think about filling out and expanding into my fascia and then rotating. So I'm looking for expansion and rotation at the same time in order to kind of decompress those coiled springs. As we're getting into this, we can start to allow the shoulder blade to slowly roll over the top of the shoulder so that we get some stretch into the upper back, and then letting it set back down as we go the other direction. And this is where I want to think about from fingertip to fingertip, like the wet washcloth, and I'm trying to wring out all the fluid, not just at the fingers, but up to the elbows, into the shoulders, and up into the upper back, and even a little bit into the neck. Since we have some neck pain issues, I want to keep the head fairly still and stable so that we're not moving into that pain. We got to keep the range of motion within what feels comfortable and not overly stressful. We can shake the arms out a little bit. We're going to come right back to our spread hands. We're going to do one hand at a time. And I want to start with my palm up as if I got a platter in the hand. Elbow is fully extended. And we're going to do a circle around the elbow, keeping that platter up until we bring it all the way to our shoulder, like we're serving a server carrying that platter. And then we'll spiral it all the way over. Come out to elbow extension and then spiral back up. So I want to make a nice big circle. I'm trying to keep my hands spread wide throughout. And I want to spread hands, extend the elbow fully, spiral as much as we can to get that spiral stretch, and then bring it all the way back around. 5 or 10 of these should start to kind of warm up that elbow area. And then we're going to reverse directions and do the same thing in the opposite direction. So this time palms down, bringing it all the way back up, spiraling up to our platter, and then trying to keep that platter from spilling as we go all the way out to full extension of the elbow, spread hands, spiral down, all the way up. Again, this will get a little fatiguing, especially if you have some significant tension patterns within that hand, elbow, shoulder complex. Switching hands, same thing opposite side, palm up, elbow extended, keeping that platter from spilling as we bring it up to the shoulder, spiral over, and then back to extension. Keep those hands spread as wide as you can as you extend your elbow as much as you can. And then spiral all the way over, seeing how smooth can you make that circle. This is also a good place to notice if there's a difference. My left shoulder my circle around my left elbow feels a little inhibited. I got some tension in my shoulder, especially as I come around this way. It doesn't feel as clean, and I have trouble keeping my hands spread as much, and my wrist straight as well. And then we're going to reverse directions. Same thing. Palm down and then spiraling to up, and then trying to keep that platter open as we extend. Again, these are good places to notice the difference on one side to the other. And I'm noticing pretty significant difference on my left side. Then we'll shake that out, and we're going to come into our wrist mobility on the floor. So spreading fingers nice and wide, grounding palms, extending the elbows. And we're going to start with just our rocking forwards and backwards, loading into the wrist space, comparing right wrist to the left wrist, noticing if there's any difference in stiffness, achiness, tension, discomfort, or pain. Getting some nice deep breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth. When there is pain in the neck, there is usually going to be some tension in the wrist. More than likely, the side of the neck that is moving, that is stiffer, that wrist will be the wrist that is stiffer. So we want to work on improving that compression that's happening at the wrist in order to relieve that stress that's happening at the neck, because they are ubiquitous, they're connected. Turning fingers out to the side. Now moving side to side, nice and easy, nice deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. And again, feeling into the wrist space. If that wrist is tighter or related to the neck, I want to make sure we are not moving into pain. I want to keep it at that level 1 to level 2 discomfort without going into anything that's into level 3 or above, especially when we got neck pain. I want to be extra cautious, extra slow, because I want to teach the body, show the body how to move in a way that's not painful, which means that we have to watch out for triggering that pain. Turning fingers all the way back towards the knees, loading into the palms and slightly leaning, rocking back hips to heels, feeling into the forearm space. Nice breaths in and out. The slower you go, the better on these. However slow you are going, you can always go even slower, especially when pain is present. And we'll flip over to the back side of the wrists. Elbows bend on this one as we work to press into the back of the wrist, extending the elbows, moving into that little bit of stretch that you might get at the elbow joint, and then letting it bend and soften. I don't want to push that stretch beyond just like a nice, comfortable, juicy stretch. If you're able to get the elbows fully extended without locking them and without a massive stretch, then we can rock back hips to heels. But if you got that big stretch in the elbow, just continue to work, bending and extending, working into that extension, slowly regaining that range of motion so that you can extend your elbows fully again. We're going to roll the wrists out a little bit just to get them a little bit of a flow, and then we're going to come right back to that quadruped, and we're going to come back to our spirals, elbow spirals. So spreading fingers out, grounding palms, and just like what we did with the bowls of soup or in our elbows or wrist spirals, I want to spiral that elbow pit so it's facing forward, and then spiral so it's facing back. And I want to really focus on those rotational muscles at the shoulder, specifically at the head of the shoulder, and at the wrist. At the wrist, you have supinator and pronator muscles. At the shoulder, you have rotator cuff muscles. I want to get those to get lengthened in both directions. So we're spiraling elbow pits. So as far as they'll go forward, feeling into that comfortable, juicy stretch, and then spiraling them inward until they're facing as far back as they will go. And with each one, we're seeing if we can spiral a little bit further in order to feel into that stretch, either at the wrist or at the shoulder or both. And this is where I want to start to think about the long arm bones are kind of like a screwdriver. As the elbow pits turn to face forward, it's screwing the palms down into the floor, and at the same time, it's screwing the shoulder blades down into your rib cage. When we spiral internally, it's kind of loosening the hands just a little bit, and it's loosening the shoulder blades. The shoulder blades are allowed to round over the top of the ribs. But then as we spiral forward, you feel them packing down and back. Elbows stay actively straight. They should not be bending on this. This is all one big spiral through that entire long bone complex. And with each one, we can start to, as you internally spiral, press a little bit more. Start to feel some stretch in between the shoulder blades. And then as you spiral elbow pits forward, feel those shoulder blades pack down towards the hips and get really tight on the ribs. See if you can feel all of that stretch at the wrist and the shoulder, as well as that packing and unpacking. Can you feel that nice mobility of the shoulder blade along the rib cage? Then again, we're gonna take some stress off the wrists, roll them out, and we're gonna get into our inverted position. So inverted, we can do cross sit to start with, or feet can be out in front. I want hands as close to hips as possible, but for some people, especially if that elbow doesn't extend well, hands can come back just a little bit in order to be able to press down into the floor and lift the sternum up tall. And we're going to start with those same elbow spirals, but we're just doing so from a different position. And we're going to key this into some of the movement of our spine. So as I want to start by spiraling elbow pits out and letting them spiral in, just keeping it at the elbows. As we're feeling that spiral back and forth, I want to kind of notice that same screwdriver effect. As elbow pits spiral out, it's going to load into the palm, and you're going to feel your shoulder blades pack down and back as your sternum kind of lifts up towards the ceiling. And as we internally spiral, it's going to loosen up the shoulder blades. They're going to round and roll, and you'll get some stretch into that upper back. And then externally spiral, feel the shoulder blades draw down as you lift up into the sternum. Internal spiral, nice rounding. Feel the shoulder blades come up to the ears. You can feel that nice big stretch in the upper back. Then see if you can feel that nice stretch across the top of the chest. Externally spiral, pressing down, opening up that chest. On the next one, as you externally spiral, we're pressing, lifting up the chest, and I want to maintain that position. External spiral, lifting up, feeling the shoulder blades packed down and back. From there, we're going to get into some neck mobility. Now, we got neck pain, active neck pain, which means our neck mobility has to be extraordinarily cautious and safe. I don't want to make this worse. I want to improve mobility without creating more tension and more spasm. So our rules of pain are extraordinarily important at this point, working through neck mobility and spine mobility. So any of these movements, you are only going up to that level 1. I don't even want to go to a level 2 right now. I just want to see if we can get any amount of quality movement that does not elevate levels of pain at the neck. So it's going to be real important here, which means we're going to start with rotation, checking blind spots, looking over our shoulders. But I already know from the pre-assessment before the class that range of motion is really, really limited. So range of motion may be as small as this. All you can do is turn an inch and bringing it back and going the same amount the other direction. That may be all you're able to get. I want to breathe in deeply and move slowly. So inhale as we're bringing our head to center. Exhale as you slowly turn, even if it's only an inch. Slowing it down, inhaling as we come back to center. Exhale as you look towards your shoulder. And with each one, if you find that you get a little bit more range of motion without pain, then explore that greater range of motion. Again, cautiously, safely, non-forcefully. We'll take whatever improvement we can get, whether it's a millimeter or a mile. I'm going to keep the reps probably around 10 for right now. Then we'll come back to center, and we're going to do the same thing with kind of the windshield wipers of the head, lightly dropping ear to shoulder. But again, my range of motion is going to be incredibly limited. You may only go so far. And we just have to be okay with whatever range we get, but we want to work the range as much as we possibly can. So shoulders are still pressing down through the palms. Ear just lightly drops towards the shoulder. As you exhale, head comes back up to center. Ear drops to the opposite shoulder. Again, range of motion may be incredibly limited if there's active pain here. So we want to work within that level 1 discomfort. We don't want elevated levels of pain. All we're doing is getting some blood flow into the neck region. And we're using this as a little bit of an assessment. We're actually going to get the foam roller out here in just a moment, and we're going to come back and see if we can get some improvement on these movement patterns. We're going to do that now. So let's go ahead and grab our foam roller. We're going to place it on the floor. And we're going to lay on our back, just placing the foam roller underneath the base of the skull as if it's a pillow or a bolster. So first thing I want to do is make sure that I can get into this position without it being aggravating on my neck. This may be a position that you just simply can't get into right now if it's painful. If so, go ahead and skip this part, and we'll discuss it after the class. So with the bolster at the base of the skull, I kind of want it sitting underneath the occipital bones, the bony prominences at the base of the skull. And from here, I want to come back into our neck mobility, just lightly letting the head turn to the right and to the left, kind of like we're checking blind spots again. But as we're doing this, you'll notice as you turn your head in one direction, it's popping up onto that little bony ridge, the occipital bone on one side of the head. And then when you turn your head the other way, it's popping up on the other one. I want to be very light with this, but I also want to be sensitive to notice, is it more sensitive when I turn my head to the right? Do I feel that pressure? And do I feel like that kind of massage pressure into the muscles that attach to that bony prominence? And is it more sensitive to the right than it is to the left? More than likely, whatever side you have neck pain on is going to be a little bit more sensitive right now. So as you're feeling into that, I want you to actually, whichever side is more uncomfortable, I want you to turn towards that side. Find the point where it's most sensitive without being above a level 1. And just take some nice deep breaths in and out. I want to imagine melting. You're just allowing your body to kind of melt over the bolster. I'm not pushing down. I'm not trying to force pressure. I'm just allowing my head to kind of melt over the roller with each exhale. Nice slow inhale. Nice long slow exhale. And see within about 30 to 60 seconds if that spot starts to reduce in discomfort. If so, great. And then we're going to do the same thing to the other side, kind of turning and finding the meaty part of that rotation where you kind of get in and feeling into the musculature that attaches to that bony prominence, and seeing if you can find a sensitive spot. If not, then you're just kind of finding a meaty spot and allowing it to melt. Nice deep breath in, exhale, and melt. After about 30 to 60 seconds, we'll bring our gaze back straight up and down. And I want to see if we're able to, we're going to move our body so that the bolster, the roller, is a little bit more underneath the neck, but I still want that bony prominence to be lightly touching the roller. I'm still using it as a bolster. I'm not doing massage. It's just supporting my neck at the moment. But we're going to come right back to the same movement of rotating the head, like you're looking to the right and then looking to the left. And so now as you turn your head, you'll feel that kind of meaty muscle to the right of the neck and to the left of the neck kind of pop up onto the foam roller. And we can feel into that to see if one side is more sensitive than the other. Again, it's probably going to be the same side that was for the occipital bones and probably the more sensitive direction of the neck. And so we're going to turn into whichever side is more sensitive without elevating pain beyond a level 1. We're just going to take some nice deep breaths and let it melt. Again, 30 to 60 seconds. As you're feeling that melt, if it's feeling good and comfortable, you can also add in some jaw mobility of seeing just opening and closing the jaw. Seeing how wide can you open your jaw without pain, and then closing, and then opening, and kind of just feeling that nice stretch from opening and closing the jaw. Notice if that is related at all to what you're feeling at the neck. And then we'll move the head to the opposite side and do the same thing. Nice deep breaths with each exhale, just allowing your body to melt, making sure that you are not in an elevated level of pain, really beyond a level 1. And then we can also add in the opening and closing of the jaw, feeling that nice stretch, opening, and then letting the jaw soften as it closes. And then again, noting if that has any impact on what you're feeling at the neck. And we can let's go ahead and go back to the opposite side and do that one more time on each side. Turning the head to the right, kind of feeling into that nice meaty area where it's a little bit sensitive, but not pain, just slight discomfort, not pain. Nice deep breaths. Let your body just melt over the roller. Again, I don't want to push, I don't want to press, I don't want to add, I don't want to try to, do massage pressure. I just want to allow the weight of my head to put whatever pressure and allow that tissue to melt. I want to stay really soft on this. As that side melts, we'll go to the other side and do the same thing. Hopefully with each time that you go back and forth, you're noticing that you have a little bit more range of motion, that you're able to turn your head. Again, I don't want to force it. I want to be very light and soft. After 30 to 60 seconds, we'll bring our head back to center. And we're going to get up nice and slowly, move the foam roller out of the way. And we're going to come back up into our inverted position, loading through the palms, pressing into the floor, spiraling the elbows out, opening up the chest, feeling the shoulder blades draw down and back. And I want to come back to our very light neck mobility. First, checking our blind spots. Again, looking over right shoulder, not going beyond, and keeping it in that low level discomfort. And here I want to assess, do you have a little bit more range of motion? It may only be another millimeter. If so, great. I want to take every little bit of improvement that we can get. And again, 10 reps will be good for right now. If you're able to get further, I want to be real cautious and slowly squeeze into that end range, exhaling without elevating that pain higher. I want to see how sensitive can we be with our movement to get as much range of motion without going into elevated levels of pain. Then we'll come back to our center and we'll get into our windshield wipers. So again, keeping the movement small, lightly dropping one ear to the shoulder, back up to neutral, opposite ear to the shoulder. Inhale as we come to center, exhale as we allow the head to drop. And again, we're seeing if we have a little bit more range of motion available in the neck as we're doing this. If you do have a little bit more range of motion and this is not painful, then we can add the string. As the ear drops, imagine you got a piece of string attached to the opposite ear, pulling it up towards the ceiling, and feel that lift to draw that traction, light traction stretch in the neck. Again, I don't want this to be level, going into 2 or above. I want to keep this extraordinarily soft and cautious. We're getting neck mobility. We are not moving into pain. Good. Then we'll come off our wrists and we're going to get into our hips. So we're going to get into our V-sit, getting legs spread wide, supporting the back with hands as much as you can to keep the spine tall. I want to actively pull the top of the foot back towards the shin and imagine that we're trying to lengthen through our heels, like we're reaching our heels across the floor. Again, I want to try to get traction at the hip joint, and then we're going to do our spirals in order to work rotation, and we're trying to get those deep rotators in the hip to move. So we're going to rotate the knees outward as far as they will go comfortably, and then spiral them internally as far as they will go comfortably without going into pain. And with each one, exhale as you rotate out. Inhale to center and then exhale as you rotate in. And you're seeing if you can squeeze a little more rotation in both directions and really getting in and feeling how does that feel deep in the hip socket. Are you able to rotate as much on the right side as you are on the left? That can be, if you got more mobility in one hip with rotation than you do in the other, the hip that doesn't rotate as much is more than likely has some compression in it because it's lacking that length of those coiled springs of those muscles. And it could be to the internal direction or it could be to the external direction. It really kind of depends on what's going on in your body. But with each one of these, we're seeing if we can get a little bit more range of motion. My left hip has less range of motion. My left hip has been what's been largely compressed with my back pain over the past couple weeks. And I can see it, especially on internal rotation. I cannot go as far. And it feels like it's stuck in that joint. Like joint's so compressed, it will not let it move any further. And now we're going to add the flossing of our feet. So as we externally rotate, we're going to now point our toes and bring it back into internal rotation and then pull the toes back towards the shins as we spiral out and then point the toes away. I want to feel that nice stretch down into the wrist, but we're still largely focusing deep in that hip socket. Doing 5 to 10 in one direction, and then we're going to reverse directions. Again, working that rotation. See how much can you feel those muscles deep in the hip socket get a little bit of stretch in both directions of internal and external rotation. Next, we're going to come into our shin box position. So I want to work, now we're going to get into kind of working the spirals around the hips, especially the glutes. If you look at the glute muscles, they are, they are in different angles which they are largely a spiraling muscle, especially if you look at a lot of these fibers, the way they come from high and then they attach down low. They are moving at an angle that very much contributes to spiral action through the hip all the way down to the knee. So want to work on getting that our hip extension first, finding that hip bone and reaching that hip bone forward, feeling that nice stretch through the front of the hip. Inhale as we let it soften. Exhale as we press into it, kind of pushing through that knee in order to get as much extension as possible and feeling that nice length at the front of the hip. With each one, see if you can press a little further forward, get more of that stretch in the front of the hip. And then we're going to go spiral across to the other side and do the same thing. Pressing through that knee, moving that hip bone forward, and then letting it soften. This is an important area to notice the difference on one side compared to the other. A lot of times, these kind of cricks that we get in the neck are not so much related to something that's wrong in the neck. It's actually that the neck is tensioning, creating tension in order to stabilize for something downstream that is unstable. But in creating tension, it's distorting the neck's ability to function on its own. So it's not so much that the neck is unstable, it's that the neck is overly stable and it's providing stability for something elsewhere in the body. Could be the hips, knees, ankles, could be something in the arms. Generally it's going to be lower extremity down into the hips and knees and the ankles and feet. So we're going to spiral back across to the other side. And now we're going to get into our folds. I just simply want to use, I'm not going to use the knee as a direct angle arrow. I just kind of want to nice, softly fold towards that leg. Exhale as we reach. Inhale as we come back up. And we're going to spiral across to the other side shin box and do the same thing. Nice exhale and feel the difference of how this stretches on the right side compared to the left side. Do you feel it in the glute, or do you feel it in your back, or do you feel it in that back hip? Differently on the right side compared to the left side. These differences are going to be hugely important, especially if you're dealing with neck pain, because they're going to give you some ideas of the pattern of where that neck is related to of other things going on in the body. Nothing else, they kind of tell us which system is unstable and is compensating to provide stability. With each one, we're seeing if we can exhale slowly, reach a little further. We can even add a nice breath on the end of each one as we slowly go back and forth. I want to do 10 good reps to each side. As we're doing these, we can play with this back knee, allowing it to open up just to get a little bit of a different load stretch through that back hip. But for the most part, I want to stay focused on the hip that's in front. So I'm not going to go into our full pigeon, but I do want to explore a little bit of that back knee angle, opening up just a hair, especially if it feels tighter on one side than it does on the other. And this is one of those movements that the slower you go, the better, especially if you have active pain in the body. As we come back up, now I want to bring in a little bit of rotation of the spine related to the hip. So I'm going to come back to extending the hip bone forward. And this is where, we got our bread, and I want to share my bread. Now, If neck is painful, allow the head, the head to stay square with the sternum and return more from sternum so that your head is spiraling with that. I don't want to lead with neck mobility on this if it's painful to the neck. We're pressing through that knee, hip goes forward, rotate through the sternum, and then see how far you can reach without feeling in too much mobility into the neck, at least not discomfort-wise. Bring it all the way back. Extend the hip first, reach and rotate. And I'm gonna say, let's actually bring this and spiral it all the way across to the other side. Extend the hip, spiral through the sternum, see how far you can reach. Since we started with 2 on the other side, we'll start with 2 on this side. Extending that hip, nice reach, and then spiraling all the way across. Again, I want to go extraordinarily slow. I want to work that reach of the hip first. Can you get that hip to extend? Can you spiral through the sternum without hurting, without pain in the neck? Then how far can you reach and extend your fingers away from your knee? How long can you get? And really squeeze into that length. Again, this is spirals, and this is spirals going through the hip and then into the spine. So we're trying to unwind those compressed coiled springs related around the spinal cord or the vertebrae, all the muscles that are attached to your spine, and the muscles are attached around the hip, trying to get those to lengthen and unwind so that they're not tightening and coiling into that compressed spring. Again, nice and slow. If this feels good, higher reps on these kind of movements, doing 10, even up to 20, and then coming back and doing them periodically throughout the day to help unwind. All these other structures should start to help take some of the stress off the neck as well. All right, so now we're going to get on our back. I'm going to bring arms straight out to the side. And I want to make sure that the head feels nice and comfortable and relaxed. Arms out to the side, palms are up. And this is, I want to kind of feel, this is that area where I want to feel like I'm laying on a bed of sand, and I want to really feel my upper back spread out and feel as much of the surface area of my back, my shoulders, elbows, wrists, and hands in contact in the sand as if I'm trying to make a perfect imprint of my upper body. And I don't want that imprint to smear. So I have to hold it still. From here, we're going to slowly lift our knees, our feet off the floor. I want to make sure that this is not painful anywhere. The head should be soft and relaxed. If we're able to get our hips up, I want our hips a little bit less than 90 degrees so that the low back is kind of pressing into the floor a little bit. Knees are at 90 degrees. And then from here, we're going to slowly let our hips rotate side to side, keeping the range of motion small to start with, kind of checking in with how does this feel on the low back? How does it feel referring up to the neck? Again, keep those hands reaching out, nice, maintaining that nice imprint in the sand. And each time you rotate your hips, see if you can go a little bit further, maintaining that nice solid imprint of your upper body. I'm less concerned with how far your hips rotate and more concerned with maintaining equal pressure of the upper body. But as we maintain that equal pressure, we are seeing if we can slowly squeeze our hips further and further in each direction without going into pain. And as we're doing this, notice if there's a difference in how it feels going towards the right compared to going towards the left. And I'm going to bring in breath on this too. I want to exhale as we rotate. Inhale as we come back to center. Exhale as we rotate. And I want to go as slow as I can with my breath. I want my breath to be slow in order to keep my range of my movement slow. Then we can bring both feet down to the floor, let the legs go straight. And then from here, we're going to bring one foot back up to the floor, and we're going to move that foot out to about 45 degrees from the midline of the body. I want to maintain that solid tripod foot on the foot that's on the floor. And we're going to start by pressing down into that leg in order to drive that hip bone forward or up towards the ceiling. I want to feel that stretch through the front of the hip and then let it soften back down. The opposite leg needs to be completely soft and relaxed in gravity. So as I press this hip up, my opposite hip should not be lifting up off the floor. That means I'm pushing down into this heel, and I want to take all that energy away from this leg. This leg should not be working. I'm pressing my hip, and it's rolling me over the opposite hip. The opposite hip is not active. And we'll do like 5 to 10. With each one of these, we're seeing if we can extend that hip further towards the ceiling. And I want to have our, again, nice tripod foot. Knee should not be rotating out, lifting the big toe up. Knee should not be turning in, lifting the pinky toe up. I want to maintain 3 points of contact with the ball of the big toe, the ball of the pinky toe, and the heel as we drive that hip up towards the ceiling on each one. And then we'll switch sides and do the same thing. So foot comes flat, and then moving it out to about 45 degrees. Pressing down through that tripod foot, moving the hip bone up towards the ceiling. Opposite leg is soft and relaxed in gravity. And with each one, we're seeing if we can press and drive that hip bone up higher without losing our 3 points of connection through our foot. And I want to really drive that foot down. I'm not lifting my hip, I am driving my foot. And like pushing my foot down, the hip gets lifted naturally. Opposite hip is not involved at all, completely relaxed. After we do 10, we're going to switch back to the other side, and we're going to do the same thing, continuing to press that hip bone up, feeling into that stretch of the front of the hip. And now we can bring our opposite arm overhead. We're somewhat overhead. I want to keep it soft and relaxed. As you press that hip bone forward up towards the ceiling, we're going to add rotation and see how far can you reach your fingers without losing the position of your back foot and back knee. So I don't want that knee caving down in order for you to reach farther. I want you to keep pressing straight down, and I want that load through the foot to stay heavy. You're pushing down, and that's allowing you to see how far you can reach with your fingers. It's kind of like you're wringing out your spine like a washcloth. Bringing it all the way back to the middle on your inhale. Exhale, hip goes up, and then reach across. Squeezing into it a little further on each one. The slower your breath goes, the slower your movement goes, the better. And after 5 to 10, we'll switch and do the same thing on the other side. Foot comes flat, out to 45, starting with that driving the hip bone up to the ceiling, pressing through that solid foot, seeing if that feels a little better the second time through. Opposite hand comes overhead. Now as we press and drive that hip up, we're reaching and rotating. Again, don't let that foot contact change. You're still driving straight down, even as you're reaching and rotating away. Don't let that knee turn with you. Keep it straight up towards the ceiling and drive down through the floor as you reach and rotate. But you're also seeing if you can reach a little further, squeezing in to that end range on each one. And now I want to do that same movement going side to side. So we're going to switch to the other leg, pressing that flat foot into the floor, reach and rotate across the body. As you bring it back across, switch sides again, going to the opposite side. And by going back and forth, you'll get a good sense of comparison. And notice any areas where you have greater tension in this range of motion. You might feel it in the hip, especially in that hip drive, the front of the hip. You might feel it in your low back. You might feel it in your mid to upper back. Where you feel it is important and helpful, especially if you have neck pain going on, because that's going to give you some indications of where that neck pain is related to, of other patterns in the body that can be worked on to help relieve the neck stuff. So now we can let our legs go nice and flat. And I want to get into a little bit of our baby roll stretch. So the stretches we just did are very similar to baby roll, except they're kind of reaching straight to the side. With our baby roll, we're getting rotation, but I also want to apply length. So I want to try to get longer, both through the feet and through the toes, at the same time that we're applying rotation. Now, with neck pain, doing baby rolls can be painful. So I want to try to keep the head as much in alignment with the sternum, kind of keeping the nose in alignment with the sternum. I don't want to turn the neck and the head into our level, above our level 1 or 2 pain. So your range of motion on this may be incredibly limited right now. That's okay. We're going to take whatever range we can get without elevated pain. So arms are coming up. If elbows stay off the floor in this position, the arms can come out to the side until they rest nice and softly on the floor. And we're reaching across, so the head has to be able to lift up a little bit. So this is the first area where I want to make sure that we have no pain. It's possible that you can put a little bit of a bolster or a pillow under your neck so that you don't have to lift, and you can just lightly let your shoulders, head turn with your chest. And we're seeing how far can you reach, keeping your heel soft on the floor. Once you get there, I want to take a nice deep breath in and exhale, reach a little further. We're going to bring it all the way back to center, and we're going to see how it feels going to the other side. Again, if this is too painful on the neck, I'd rather skip it for right now. But if you can get any kind of range of motion on this that does not go over that level 1 or 2 pain, then I want to get into it as much as I can, softly and safely and non-forcefully. As we're going back and forth, now I want to start to apply that length. So I'm reaching across, which is rotation. Now I want to extend my fingers as much as I can towards the wall at my head. And my feet, my toes, I'm reaching through my feet towards the wall at my feet. And I'm seeing if I can get length. Can I feel that stretch? Kind of from fingertip through shoulders, through the low back, into the hips, down to the feet. Can I feel that long stretch from fingertip to toe tip? And can I feel it on the opposite side as well? I want to get long through fingertips, long through toe tips. And I'm reaching as much away as I can as we're rotating. Again, trying to uncoil those springs. And like everything else we've done so far, the slower, the better. Now I'm going to add one more little thing here. As we reach, going to a non-painful position, however far you're able to reach is adequate. If you can only go so high, that's fine. I want to bring in our bowls of soup, kind of arm spirals again. So as we reach, spread the hands of that hand reaching, elbow extended fully, and now we're going to do some light spirals through that elbow. I want to see if we can feel that rotation at the shoulder socket as we're reaching away and through our fingers and our toes. So again, we're applying that length with rotation. And 3 to 5 reps on each side of this will probably be adequate. And you can do that once or twice to each side. Again, spreading the hands wide, extending the elbows, and then spiraling that elbow out and in as far as you can to see if you can feel that mobility stretch at the rotator cuff area of the shoulder socket. You may also feel it down at the wrist. And again, we're also reaching away from fingertip to toe tip at the same time. Then we can come back to center, and we're going to do our reaches through our feet. So now I'm reaching across the body. The head, for the most part, I want to stay soft and relaxed. And I want to keep this foot high. I don't want to let my leg drop to the floor because that can create some pinch in my hip. So it's kind of like I'm trying to touch something up on a shelf, but I'm trying to touch with my toe tips. So I'm trying to get that nice length with the rotation. Inhaling to center, exhaling across. I'm reaching as far as I can, keeping some point of contact with my hand on the floor. Shoulder blades are allowed to lift up a little bit. So as I reach across, my shoulder is coming up, but I'm keeping some contact with my hand. With each one, I'm seeing if I can rotate a little further. And then I want to add in our length. Reaching through toes and reaching away through fingertips, trying to get as long as possible with that rotation. Reaching in both directions. Trying to uncoil some of these springs. You may notice that it's tighter in that length on one side than it is on the other. So again, that's very pertinent information, super helpful in understanding some of these patterns that are going on in the body. And the last thing I want to add to this is as we reach and get long, we can do our spirals through our shoulder again. So you can let that shoulder come off the ground ever so lightly and do some bowls of soup as you're reaching away through your toes, reaching away through your fingers, making sure that this is not painful. I want to be non-stressful here, but I'm seeing if we can get some length with spirals in that shoulder. And then we'll bring it across and do the same thing on the other side. Nice reach, length, bowls of soup, spirals. Fingers are spread nice and wide, making sure that we're avoiding going into pain. Only moving as far as you can comfortably. And notice if there's a difference in how one side spirals compared to the other side. We'll come back to center. Let the knees bend, feet flat on the floor. And you can close your eyes, and I want to take some nice deep belly breaths into the belly, filling up the belly button towards the ceiling, but also breathing into the side body and breathing into the low back. As you inhale, see if you can feel your low back spread across the floor. Imagine you have your abdominal space is a balloon that's on the floor, lightly pressed into the floor. And as you inflate that balloon, it's going to inflate down and spread across the floor. I want that same kind of sensation on our inhale. It fills up the belly, but it also expands out the side, and it fills in and flattens out across the floor on the inhale. And on the exhale, navel comes into spine. Exhale through the mouth, full exhale. And then full inhale. With each breath, seeing if you can expand a little bit more. After 3 or 4 breaths, I want to continue with that balloon action breath, the crocodile breath through the abdominal space. But now I want to start to bring that breath up into the chest and even up into the clavicle and neck region. Can you feel that expansion through the chest? Can you feel your ribs expand? Exhale, full exhale, navel to spine. Can you bring that breath up into your upper chest? Can you feel your clavicles expand? Can you feel that breath up into the neck? Can you feel it associated with any of the tension that you have currently in the neck? If so, then you're getting some stretch related to breath, and this is a really good place to work. Breathing fully in and fully out. Again, we're trying to get that length to unwind all these spiral springs. And the last bit, I want to bring that breath, it's continuing to inflate the abdominal space. It's continuing to expand into the chest, into the neck. Can we also draw that breath down into the pelvic floor? Imagining that pelvic bowl as being flexible, so as we breathe down, that pelvic bowl expands downward. So can you breathe into the belly, up into the neck, and down into the bowl of your pelvis all at once? As you inhale, you're feeling that length as it breathes down and up. Feel your spine lengthen along the floor. As you exhale, drawing navel into spine, you can feel your spine kind of soften and shrink a little bit. And then on your inhale, you're seeing if your spine will go long through the floor. Exhale, softens. You'll feel that length through the top of the skull. The chin should kind of draw in a little bit as you exhale, as the top of your head slides upward on the floor towards the wall at your head. And your spine, you're breathing down into your tailbone at the exact same time. Inhale, the head kind of tilts, chin comes up. Exhale, chin tucks down, reaching through the top of the head along the floor. And when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes and get up nice and slowly.